Hello, my name is Jason Phillips. I'm a member of the San Saba Historical Commission and San Saba Historical Society. I was asked to research a battle that has great significance within a series of events in the early days of the Republic of Texas. On the 15th of February, 1839, a battle occurred between the Comanche, a company of Texans, and their Lipan Apache allies in San Saba County. I was asked to research where the battle may have occurred. First, I'd like to look at the historical context in which this battle was set. The Republic of Texas was only 3 years young. The Texas president at the time was Marabou Lamar, elected 3 months before the battle took place. His policy was to remove Native Americans from Texas one way or another. The frontier at the time was a desperate place where violence was meted out by both Texans and Native Americans on one another. This is a map of Texas that was created in 1839. This is what Texas looked like at the time of the battle. You can see the Republic of Texas counties, roads, and population centers oriented along the Gulf Coast. The northwest part of the map, where there are no counties, roads, or towns, is Comanche territory. In 1839, San Saba was almost 100 miles within Comanche territory. The frontier between the two civilizations is where great conflict would have occurred. The Texans were led by Captain John Moore, Captain William Eastland of LaGrange, Captain Noah Smithwick of Bastrop, and Chief Castro, leader of the Lipan Apaches. Captain Moore wrote a report of the battle less than 1 month after the battle occurred. He submitted it to the Texas legislature, where it exists today in the state archives. This is the best first-hand account of the battle that we have today. I'm going to read to you from Captain Moore's report that he submitted to the legislature as he describes leaving the settlements in search of the Comanche. I herewith transmit you the muster rolls of 3 volunteer companies, which, in conformity to an act of Congress authorizing the raising of volunteer companies for the protection of the frontier, were organized on January 25th at the upper settlements on the Colorado and placed under my command to proceed against the Comanche and other hostile Indians on our northwestern frontier. From this place, we proceeded on the morning of the 26th directly up the Colorado. This is the map that we were looking at previously. It's zoomed in a little bit. This is the Colorado River. This is the Llano River. This is the San Saba River. These are the settlements where the Texans originated, Bastrop and LaGrange. They moved up the Colorado River to an encampment. I'm going to keep reading Moore's report. On the 18th of February, our spies, which from the mouth of the Llano had been kept in advance, reported that they had discovered Comanches on a small stream called Spring Creek in the valley of the San Saba. The Texans were here at the mouth of the Llano, which today is Kingsland, Texas. They moved up the Colorado River and into the San Saba River Valley, where they engaged the Comanche and the battle occurred. I'm going to continue reading from Moore's report as he describes the actual battle events. The attack after daybreak by marching down between the timber and the village, whose skirts run parallel to each other for the purpose of having the timber in our rear and driving the enemy towards the prairie. It was now discovered that the opposite side, which had been supposed to have opened to the level prairie, was bordered by a meander of the bayou which formed a deep and secure place of retreat into which the savages had fled, and in which they had already rallied and formed for defense. It became necessary to retire for a moment. Attacks were repeated at short intervals until 10 a.m., after which the firing from the enemy continued, but from a considerable distance. What I'm going to do now is take the few sentences that we've read and inspect the clues that they contain about the battle. There are clues here about the battle setting, about the relative positioning of the forces, the geographic setting, and so forth. And what I'm going to do is take those clues and draw the battle from scratch. Start with a blank slate and paint onto that canvas what is described here. And we'll see what we have at the end of that process. This is our blank canvas onto which we are going to reconstruct what Moore described in his report. So Moore described an encampment or village on a small stream called Spring Creek. I'm going to infer that Moore was talking about a spring-fed creek and not a creek that was specifically named Spring Creek. The reason for that is that in my research, looking at newspapers and books written by historians and so forth, and other accounts, I cannot find any evidence that any geographic features in this area were named by Texans before 1850, and this battle occurred in 1839. So I think that it is unreasonable to think that this creek had been named Spring Creek. I think that it was probably spring-fed, and therefore I've placed a spring here at the headwaters of this creek. Moore describes marching down between the timber and the village, whose skirts run parallel to each other. So there's timber in the village whose edges are parallel, and Moore marched towards the village to engage the Comanches. And Moore describes that on the opposite side, which had been supposed to have opened to the level prairie, so on the opposite side of the village and the creek, here he saw that there was an open and level prairie. However, whenever he attacked the town, he saw that it was bordered by a meander of the bayou. Now, this word bayou confused me. I grew up swimming in a bayou on the Texas Gulf Coast when I was a kid, and I haven't really seen anything here in San Saba County that looks to me like a bayou. So I looked up the etymology of the word, and bayou comes from Choctaw and means small stream. So substituting that meaning here and rereading it, the opposite side, which had been supposed to have opened to the level prairie, was bordered by a meander of the small stream, which formed a deep and secure place of retreat into which the Comanche had fled. So the small stream, when Moore engaged the Comanche and was here, he saw that bordering the prairie was a meander, again, of the small stream into which the Comanche fled. And this meander apparently had steep banks. It was deep, and it afforded the Comanche a defensible position. Moore had to retreat, and he said that attacks were repeated at short intervals until 10 a.m., after which the firing from the enemy continued, but from a considerable distance. That last part makes me think that the Comanche firing was not within effective range. Moore does not seem especially concerned about the firing. It was from a considerable distance, and he does not describe having to retreat further. So what is the effective range of a Comanche bow? If you do some research online, it will tell you that a Comanche with his bow was effective with that bow out to 200 yards. So I'm going to infer that this distance from the meanders where the Comanche had retreated to where the Texans had retreated was at least 200 yards. I think that 200 to 300 yards, possibly further, is a good guess. This is a topographic map of the San Saba area. You can see the town here. Up is north. This is the San Saba River meandering around the north side of the town and flowing off to the east. These are topographic lines. These lines represent 20 feet difference in elevation gains. So this line here is 20 feet lower than this line here. I'm going to zoom in and rotate to the right a little bit. And I want to call your attention to Mill Creek here, close to the bottom. Mill Creek is spring-fed. It's about a half mile from the start to the finish over here. So this is a very small spring-fed creek, in contrast to every other spring-fed creek in San Saba County. All the other spring-fed creeks in San Saba County are much, much longer. This area is, if you look at the topo lines here, and there's another one over here, these topo lines are very far apart. That means that this area is very flat. So this area is full of alluvial soil, which means that over time the San Saba River would have meandered over this area in the San Saba River Valley and deposited river sediment. And this would be a very flat area that would have looked like a prairie from a vantage point over here by Mill Creek. So again, I've zoomed in on Mill Creek a little more. Here's Mill Creek. This part of Mill Creek that's upstream, close to the springs where Mill Pond Park is today. If you look at the topographic lines here, around this part of Mill Creek, you can see that they're far apart, which means that the banks and the terrain around this part of Mill Creek are very gently sloping. They're grassy. This is a great place to camp. You're close to the headwaters where the springs are just literally pumping 5 million gallons of clean water out of the ground every single day. In this area, this part of Mill Creek, on the north side of Highway 190 now these days, you can see here these topographic lines. There's two here. They're very close together. That means that these are 20 feet difference in elevation and they're very close. That means that the banks of Mill Creek in this area where these meanders are at, the banks are very deep, sometimes more than 20 feet deep in this area. Here's the springs. And if we take what we created earlier, reconstruct it from Moore's account, and we take that and we transpose that on top of Mill Creek here, where in this area you could possibly have the village. There is a tree line here on this map. However, there's different properties over here, like the museum is here and other properties in this area today. However, if Moore was here, he would have seen across the creek and across where the village might have been located, this flat prairie, this grassy plain of alluvial soil over here. This area with the deep meanders that are close so that the villagers could have run and retreated and gotten into these deep meanders. What is this distance here from where the villagers might have sought refuge and where they might have been firing from considerable distance but still firing outside of effective range to where Moore retreated? What is this distance? If you go to Google Maps and use Google Maps distance measuring tool, it says that from the deep meanders here in Mill Creek, north of Highway 190, to this area here behind the current day museum, this is 1,200 feet. So this is 400 yards, which, as far as bow shots are concerned, might be considered considerable distance. Moore might have been in this area as well, which would have been closer to 300 yards. So 300 to 400 yards here, which seems to fit Moore's account. There are two more clues contained in first-hand accounts that may help place the location of the battle. Captain Moore, describing how the Texans traveled up the Colorado River and turned west into the San Saba River Valley, writes, "On the succeeding day, we marched about an hour under cover of the timber of the Colorado bottom. We then deposited our packs and baggage in a place of security and proceeded onward, still seeking the cover of timber and valley, to a place about 10 miles from the village, where we remained until after sunset. After night, we proceeded to within a mile of the village. The currently accepted interpretation of this passage says that the distance between the point where Moore left the Colorado and turned into the San Saba River Valley and the Comanche village is 10 miles. Captain Noah Smithwick of Bastrop, in his memoir, The Evolution of a State, transcribed almost 60 years after the events in San Saba, spied the location of the Comanche village from atop a hill not far from the mouth of the San Saba River. He writes, "I took a Lipan and went on in the direction they had been heading. We kept on up the Colorado on the east side till near the mouth of the San Saba, when on ascending a rise overlooking the valley, we saw smoke rising some miles up the San Saba. The Indian said he knew it was from campfires because it ascended in columns. If it were prairie fires, it would spread out in clouds. He said it was no use to go any farther as he knew exactly where the camp was located." This is a matrix that summarizes what we've discovered by looking at the clues provided in the first-hand accounts and applies that knowledge against a list of creeks which are the most obvious candidates for the battle site in San Saba County. As you can see, the most discriminating characteristic as described by Moore is the fact that it is small. Wallace Creek, the most accepted location to date, however, without any corroborating evidence or positive first-hand statements of affirmation, is anything but small, with a length of over 15 miles. Also, should the interpretation of Moore's 10-mile comment prove to be accurate, Mill Creek is also the best fit there. Personally, I do not think that the location of the battle will ever be known with 100% certainty. However, applying this type of scientific analysis to see which might be the most probable location has shown some promising results. My work on this topic is a continuation of work begun by the late Tommy Worth Wood of San Saba County and David Williams, both San Saba County Historical Commission members. I want to thank David Williams very much for his help, and also Donnelly Bryce, Texas State archivist, historian, and author, who sanity checked my work and gave me a thumbs up.